Yud Aleph Adar Rishon Hatavshim Samech Chemshech Samech Vav, page Kuf Mem Tes.
Alright, so we saw the difference between the way of the B'chinas Rotzoi and the way of the B'chinas Shoiv. The difference between Chochmah and Bina. I saw that there was Bina was connected with the Ina from his Bonanas, the Ina from Asoger, and that was therefore Ina Ha'ora of Elakus, and also it's Bo B'derech Ha'ora Elo Adam. It's only Ha'ora from the Nefesh. We saw the Ina from Re'iyah. Re'iyah is in the Mahus Adova, and then now Nimshal is in the Ina from Mahus Elakus, and therefore the Adam is Nidbach to call Atzmusay. It's the Ina from Lekis and the Chabras. It's the union of Re'iyah, and we saw that was similar to the union of Re'iyah, and that was what we saw as the Mila of Chochmah, that the highest union in Chochmah is what we call Re'iyah, and it's the union of Re'iyah Mahus, and we spoke about that in some length, the union from Re'iyah Mahus in Elakus, and from that is Nasa B'chinas Shoiv Heifach B'chinas Harotzei. He loses his whole Metzius. He doesn't feel his own entity anymore at all. He becomes completely batel to Elakus. It's impossible for him to liaise b'chinas rotzei shuvu b'chinas yeshva dovo, since he's lost his whole Metzius and he's completely involved and batel in Elakus. Then it's impossible for him to feel himself as a yesh entity and a existing thing in a form of a Metzius v'yesh v'gabi Elakus, because he's completely and utterly batil in the Gilu Hamahus, and therefore it's impossible for him to be in an inyan from Rotzai, which is that he has a mavukish, he's a yesh, he wants to go up. No matter lamaila to Elakus, and therefore ki'im b'chinas shoy, that he can only be in a matter of going down, carrying out b'bitul gomo the inyan of the rotzen of the Eibishter. We compared it to the inyan, the bina v'chochma, to the type of his pilas and arousal and inflaming emotion that the person has from hearing about the godless of the king, or his arousal when he's distant from the king. Well, that's in the Moshel. That's the union of Bina, because it's union from Shmiyah, and he hears it only from a distance. But when he comes in front of the king, and we saw that the Re'iyah, the absolute observing, the Einei Basa, the union Hariyah, the tremendous Tiferes Gedulosei of the Melech, and he's Neifel Oretz Ke'evan Daimon. So now we go on, K'moi Kain Yuvan Baruch Nias, the B'chinas Re'iyah, the Chochmah, Sheroya Mahus Elakus, Ena B'chinas Ispilus Rotzoi, Klau, Ki Im Hu B'chinas Shoiv Lamata, Ki Ein Boi Koyach Klau, La leis lamaila, ki in la seis lamato kelim yagila Elakus. Ma shenisava HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyis leidira b'taktoinim davke. I think that's where we were holding. The Riyah of Chochmah, which we saw is Shaya to Riyah, is Shaya to Dafki to Mahu. You see the essence of Elakus. Then it's not Shaya Re'inian from Rotzai, because Rotzai is where he's distant. That's the way he hears about the greatness of the king. He's distant, and on the contrary, he wants to go upwards and close. But once he sees the Mahus and he's in a state of Kiruv, but not just stam nearness, but a kiruv atzmi to the melech, or to the Indian of divinity in general. And then he's in a state of shoiv lamata, because he doesn't have the koyach. It's not shayach by him from going upwards. Tzimoyan lamaila, dafke to be lamata, bitul goma to the rotzen of the Eibishter, and to make all the inyonim here lamata in this ilam kelim gilu elakus. In other words, that he doesn't lose. We could say that the diktuk, why does he make everything down here a kelim gilu elakus? And he makes dafke adira betaktuinim. So we have to suggest that that's mitzad, that he hasn't lost his chush, his feeling, his sensitivity to elakus. Mitzad the fact that he's in a state of shoy. And that's what we could say is the great milah of the rotzai, that having gone outwards first, in a tremendous thirst for elakus, then he has what you might call a chush, and a sensitivity, and a high realization of the wondrousness and the greatness of elakus. Just the change and the difference between the two is the union, like we saw, either being be'etzem rochaik or being be'etzem koreh. Once he becomes koreh to elakus, and he feels not only the wondrousness of elakus per se, but he feels the kavona. He feels what is the ultimate purpose of the whole fact that the Eibush to put him down in the world, and that there are such inyonim as neshomis and nivroim that they can come to know the Eibush. So it's not that he lost his sensitivity to Gilu Elakus, on the contrary. He has a tremendous awareness of Gilu Elakus, but he's more sensitive, be'emes, to the Kavona. And that's the inyan of Re'iyah, that he sees the Mahusai inyan, therefore he senses not just the what you might call the tremendously attractive aspect of it, but he sees what is the emes of Elakus, the emes lamitoi, and therefore he realizes that chush, that tremendous what you might call sensitivity that he has to revelation, well, that's not going to be from now on in a way of him going upwards and out of the world in order to gain revelation, but he's going to bring that revelation that he had such a highest in, he's going to bring that lamata, and he's going to make with that a dibata toinim. He's going to bring that gilui into all the kelim of the Dvarim Gashmiyim. So you might say, well, Dvarim Gashmiyim are not kelim, they're just Dvarim Gashmiyim, the Dvarim physical material inyonim. Since he's got such a chush and a feeling for elakus, then that gives him the ability to make those Dvarim Gashmiyim kelim. In other words, that he can be poel, this new bittul that he felt, that through coming so close to the mahus, then he feels a bittul, that bittul can also be nimshach into the Dvarim Agashmiyim. So that when he's busy with inyonim, b'zeh ha'ilom, he uses them in a different way. He's poel bohem ayin of dira. He makes them a place where that tremendous concept of gilui can now dwell in a permanent way, lamata dafki in the Dvarim Agashmiyim. So therefore that's a whole cloud of Kol Adar. We'll soon see that more as we go along. Kol Adar hagavoya b'yisa yored lamata b'yisa, dafki, because he's able to be down in the world, and he's dafki being mamshich in yonim in of elakus into the Dvarim Agashmiyim. Then we have to say that he's drawing on a much higher level in elakus, because whatever's higher, that can definitely come down le lamata. Yes, is one on the famous cloud brought down in Kutitera, and the author talks about the Mitzvah has got a bigger reason about it in the Maimonides for Purim. Dafki, as soon as Dafki is going to get to the Mitzvah Rebbe brings the whole content of Dafki, something which is tremendously high in its shirish, then it's able to come down Dafki lamata, because something which is higher etzem is in a way beyond the whole limitation of Mairo Mata, being as it is such an essential Indian of elakus. Therefore it's able to come lamata, just like it's able to be Lamaila, and therefore tell to come Lamata Mata and make a deer loyes Bora Batach. Tahagam, well now I started with a new Shaila Rebbe. Tahagam de Mavur B'Mokim Acher. Hagam, it's been explained in other places. The Mebchinas Riyah de Chochma and also Mebchinas Hadveikes. It's well known that Mila that we just saw in Pneumius of the Koyach HaChochma, which is seen, Riyah, observation, it's written in other places that from that he becomes in a state of Dveikus, in other words, cleavage or cloven to Elikus. The Dveik means something which is cloven. Therefore nowadays they call glue, they call it Devek. David Veis Kuf. But that's the idea of sticking on and become one thing with something. Okay, do a binyan Eina Doima Shmiya Loria. It's one on, says the Rebbe, in the concept of Eina Doima Shmiya Loria, that it can't be compared hearing to seeing. Now that's a klal in Divrei Chazal. Now it occurs in Midrashim. It also occurs in the Gemara in the sector Kesubas. But the Gemara says over there that Eina Doima Shmiya Loria, in reference to Dayonim of a Bezdin. Normally a Bezdin functions by the fact that it makes its decision on the basis of what it hears from Eidim. In other words, it hears from people who saw what happened. And the Bezdin says, well, you guys saw what happened, tell us what did you see, and they give Eidas, and the Bezdin makes its decision on that. In other words, the Bezdin hears from somebody who saw it, but only hears. It gives wit. Well, let's just imagine, says the Gemara, that the Bezdin was a Bezdin, and all of a sudden something happened in front of the three Darim as they were sitting as a Bezdin, and something happened. They wouldn't need Eidos about that. It wouldn't make any sense to call in Eidim and say, listen, what do you guys say about that? Because the Dayanim themselves, as a Bezdin, saw it with their own eyes. And that was in the Gemara, in a Daima, real Shmiya, that then you wouldn't need Eidos, because the Eidos is only a Shmiya by the Bezdin. That's what I see, it brings the Gemara in Masecta Kesubas, Eina Doima Real or Shmiya Real or Real Shmiya. You can't compare seeing to hearing to seeing. That seeing is a much more greater and convincing and powerful influence on the experiencer than what Shmiya is. Even though both of them are kosher, al pitoira. But you don't need the Shmiya where you've had Real. And as is in Kamar Maimorei Chazal, Benegetu, in reference to the Potan Machilta, in reference to the Kriyas Yamsuf was a for Re'iyah in Elikus. Brought down Rosh Ashifcha Alayam Asher Roy Yecheskel ben Buzi, the Novi Yecheskel and the Novi Yeshaya. What their meaning was Re'iyah is Eina Doima Shmiya lo Re'iyah, when you saw something for yourself. Same with Matan Torah, all the Yidden heard, even the Koilis. Where it's brought down, Kolam Royim, I feel there's a Koilis by Matan Torah. So therefore, that's the klal that Eina Doima Re'iyah le Shmiya. The Kasher Shoymeya Me'iza Dovo Eishuhu Koi. When a person hears about something that it's a good thing, however, afterwards he sees the very essence of the thing, and he mispoil even achale kamrei. You hear about the mile of a certain thing, you hear about the advantage of a certain inyan, so then you're impressed and you feel arousal, and you'd like to have that in you, you'd like to be involved with that in you, close to it. But when you actually see it, and you're as pious as completely different, incomparably different. When you see it, then you see the very mahus hadova.
Like the king.
Like
the king.
Yeah, like we just saw by the king. Ain't a dema reala. Shmiya is that the Indian of Shmiya causes a much greater is pilot by the person al tiv ha'inyan. Umavua b'makim acher שזה מה שנדבק בעצם הדבר ואין היוכל לא זוז ממנה כלל. So the Rebbe, it's mavua that through Riyah, why do you feel this pilot and this deep reaction with Riyah, seeing in such a way? He said, because when you see something, then you become nidbak, you become literally cloven or stuck on to the very essence of that matter. You can't move from it because it remains with you in a etzemdika way. Like you say, I saw that with my own eyes, and therefore I'll always remember this, and so on. It'll always be part of me for the rest of my life, etc., etc. In other words, the koyach hariyah, for that matter, the koyach hashmiyah, they have the ability to bind and cause a devakas between two things which are rechokim zemizeh. For example, the Indian from Rio, you can see a stone, a thing which is a doimei, or you can even see a piece of ground, or you might even see the water is also a doimei of the sort. You can see the sea or a river, and that's completely distant from the mahus of a mensch. A mensch, like every a piece of stone, or like offer a completely rechokim be'erach zeh. And yet, nonetheless, after through the Indian from Rio, a kiruv is caused between them, which sees the stone, and he reacts in such a way to the beauty or to the majesty or to the bigness or whatever it may be, the majesty of that stone, or that mountain, or that Indian, or field, or river, whatever he saw, and that causes a connection to the point that stone literally becomes dovuk in the odom. Now, not that the stone he walks around with a stone in his tummy or something. What it means is that his seichel and his tainug, which are there, the highest koyches inside the mensch, they form a picture of that stone inside them, till the stone becomes part of his whole awareness and his whole, what you might call seichel, afila. He forms a picture inside his highest spiritual koyches of that stone, and he reacts to it in a way that he reacted something that he had mamish be'etzem atzmusay. We see that the koyach har-re'iyah has got this amazing ability to cause a dveikus between dvarim ar-rechokim be'erach altogether, to the point that he's not able afterwards to move from that, because it's mamish become part of his seichel and part of his oineg, his koyach hatayna, which is a very high koyach makifim in the nefesh shait to the etzem nefesh afila. So now the same, when you hear something, the shmir also causes a bond between something which is outside you and something which is inside you, the haini or seichel. But it's not in that same way that when you saw it, you heard about it, and it causes a certain reaction within your mind, and maybe even within your tainug, but it's on a different level, because you're only going on the basis of what you were told, what you heard about it. So therefore there can sometimes be a chalishas, or can be interferences with that inyan, and therefore that's the klal, they ain't a dema shmir l'riyah, even though they both have the same basic function, that they bridge this tremendous gap and they cause a connection. However, the inyan of riyah causes what we call devakas. It causes this joining up of his etzem with that dover, afilo adoimei, to the point that he's not able to move from it at all.
It seems from this, we should say Shema Yisrael, but we should say Rei Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad.
That's a very good question. What's Ein Chanam is brought down in certain places in Siddur, that Moshe Rabbeinu, why did he send the Meradnim into Eretz Yisrael? that he wanted to be mamshik, the Indian of Re'iyah, because his madrega was Re'iyah. And he wanted to be mamshik, the Indian from Re'iyah, through the Maraglim into all the people who were going to go later into Eretz Yisrael. Therefore he said, Re'isem esa oretz mahi. Ma is the bittel from Chochmah, the Indian from Re'iyah. And you notice he said to the Maraglim several times, you must see. Re'isem, this. In Yonim, the word ma occurs about 3 or 4 times in the instructions given by Moshe Rabbeinu. But since the fact that they had their big yerid of the Maraglim, they weren't able to. So therefore everything changed into a different shmiyah. It all altered into shmiyah. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, Shema Yisrael. The Cholapokas, you must have the bittul from shmiyah. They give you everything that you're going to face. You follow? Luya too, that they would have been on the madrega that Moshe wanted of them, they would have had Re'iyah. And then maybe that would have caused a difference with the whole Indian. It could be in that the Beis Hamikdash, Mitzvah got a whole thing about it. It could be that the Beis Hamikdash would have been built, and then there wouldn't have been any necessity for the Gola. So, Arichas Einyonim, it's a pretty place. The simon that if you don't listen to Moshe Rabbeinu, Mamish Kol HaProtim, Shuhu Omer, then you can bring one of the 5 goals. Moshe Rabbeinu says, then you have to listen. Not only listen, but you have to see. To come to see what says out. You understand? It's written in the whole of Sefer Devarim when Moshe Rabbeinu was preparing the Eden to go into so finally the door which passed through the whole, got over the whole door of the Maraglim. It's ready now to go in, the new generation, ready to go in there. And so you see that Moshe keeps saying to them, Shema, Haskesu Shema. You'll see, come upon him, the word Shmir occurs. Not the Indian from Riyah. So, Eino Chanami. I'll upon him. That's the koyach Riyah that it causes a dveikis between Dvarim Rechoikim until he becomes nidbach in the etem Adar. It's what they tell. There's a famous story which occurs in the it's Ra'ui Lahaskiyate, even though it's a sipur, it'll take a couple of minutes of our time, or it's Kedai. Because the Friedrich Rebbe writes, and the Friedrich Rebbe's got a whole Rishima, where he writes about how tremendously super sensitive his father was to things that he saw, things that he heard. It was tremendously. So he said that they once were in Rome, I think it was, or one of the cities in Italy, and they heard that there was this, or maybe it was in Europe. It could be it wasn't in Italy. It was in Europe, and they heard that there was this big art gallery, big art exhibition. So the Rabbi Hashem said he wants to go in and see for a minute what's this, was it the ganze, was Tutzendorf. So they went into this big art, and there was a picture there by Michelangelo, as they started to figure out, by the artist Michelangelo, as they started out. And it was this, I think it's called The Judgment, or something. There's this tremendous picture he's got of a court case, a person being judged in his life, and you got all these judges, and you got the accused, and you got the people trying to defend him, and it's most amazing. It's one of the biggest masterpieces, from the great masters to do it. So they came to this picture, and the Rabbi Rashab stood there, and he was unable to move. He was just so taken by the whole thing. And it's an unbelievable, dramatic scene, That's certain that he stood there and he was just nidbak b'kol Mahusay, and the Friedrich Rebbe couldn't move him. He wasn't able to. He was so taken by it. The Friedrich Rebbe writes a whole big richness about how his father reacted to this picture, and then later, finally, they moved on. And the Rebbe Rashab gave him a whole tremendous running commentary about what was really happening, and how this guy was timing for his life, and how the judges weren't prepared to hear, and there was others who were timing for him, and then there were people in the background that were reacting. That was unbelievable. And then they saw another picture, I think it was by another artist. So one of the big masters. And Rashab was also, he just couldn't move. He was just taken so completely. A picture or a field or something, a bird. I don't know exactly. wie es escaped, exactly what it was, but some amazing, sort of masterpiece of just, and the Rebbe Rashab was just, he was completely taken. Once again, he gave this whole running commentary of what the artist really wanted to depict, what was he really trying to say. So the Friedrich Rebbe writes over there, we see the Goydel HaKoyach there is in the Rio, and how if you represent things, how much you can cause for him to even and Chas v'Sholom, and the opposite, how much you can cause the opposite. And again, that was a whole big hezbollah, but the Rebbe Rashab's reaction to these masterpieces he saw. A pele nifla. So from that we see that the Indian of Ru'iyah causes this unbelievable connection with things that you see. And it's put down in other Maimorim that you see a Tsiyu Noah, a beautiful picture, then you can also, and that's a tugma, that wasn't just a beautiful picture, it was like a tremendously moving, scene, what you might call a person, striving for his life in front of these judges. And the Rebbe Rashab was just completely taken aback by it, to the point that he couldn't move. He was just nidbak for quite a long time. Yeah, but clearly he had this unbelievable. They say that if a child cried, he couldn't take it. If it was in pain or cried, they just had to take the child away. It's just maybe crying because it was uncomfortable or something. But he couldn't. Rebbe Rashab, he couldn't take it. He wasn't able to take another being in pain or suffering. He couldn't. He wasn't able to take it. Unbelievable. Oh, anyway, so he writes out that he can't move from it, and that's a dogma. He just wasn't able to move. So it's written and said because the two things become, and that thing becomes part of your elevated being as a human being. That's Riyah Gashmis in a Dova Gashmi. So he says a similar thing is in the Riyah de Chochma, Mahus Elakus, because we saw that Davke takes Mahus Elakus. Shenidbak B'Mahus Va'atzmas Elakus, B'Pchinas Dveikis Amiti, She'ene Yochel Liporid Mizeh Klal. He said, when you have emphasis, Riyah of Chochma, you come to this high and elevated, highest point in Chochma, and you use that to observe Inyan Eloki, then it's clearly you see the very essence of Elokus, which, as we pointed out earlier, is a very undescribably high level. Hari Inyan Adveikis, says the Rebbe, U B'chinas Rotzoi, Hidabek no Matala Maila Davke. He said that in you from Dveikus, where you cleave yourself to Elokus, then you are a created being. You're a limited human down here, and Elokus, Mahus Elokus is Miyodea, the Goydel HaErach. It's indescribably higher than your Erach. And like we saw that in the Dova Gashmi works the other way, that the mensch causes a kesher between him and our Dova Deimei Mafila, is Elokus. When you see that Elokus, and there's a kesher between you and the Inyan, and it literally draws you upwards, and you become lost, albeit in a state of Tveikis, but that is in a form of Milmatala Lamaila Daki. You are going up into Elokus. And remember, that's a Yitzhia from your Metzias, Milmata Lamaila into Elokus. Okay, Moshe Royem Bachush, Shadveikis, Shemitzad Ariyah, Betuv Hadova, Yesh Bezer Rotzoi, Masha Nimshach, Ve Nidbak. In Yiddish, Tzitzach zu der Zach. And he said, like we see, in simple observation, chush means in the sensual film. Like we go back now to the Dova Moshe, the Dova Gashmi. When you see something which is very good in your eyes, very impressive, you quickly go out of your situation. Your nimshach v'nidbach, he draws himself over. Zion in Yiddish means to draw yourself. Tzitach, he draws himself out towards that matter. He goes from where he is into that inyan. Like we just described it, the Rebbe took his whole being and he placed himself in the place of the person that he saw in the picture. He went out of himself into that inyan. So the same, so the Rebbe, that's a form of rotzoi. Yeah, commotion is what is the point being made is that this inyan of dveikus, even though it's mitzad chokhmah, it's a inyan for rotzoi, and that's the kasha that we're asking. Commotion is boili yil b'dibur hamasel v'yichula hashamayim. I don't know if you remember anybody who was here in the class when we learned that maimah. Shagam bi'av b'tanugim yesh b'chinas merutzer. There's also an inyan of what he's looking for. He's longing for something, meaning that he's going out from where he is towards something beyond himself. Albeit the inyan of ava b'tanugim is a inyan shel deveikus. It's almost a inyan from deveikus, but it's going out in the form of a running from where you are into a higher state of being dovuk in Elikus. That's what we call ava b'tanugim. The Alter Rebbe brings it down in Tanya Perek Tes and Perek Yud. That's one of the types of ava the tzaddikim gemurim feel. What do we mean by ava b'tanugim? Rabbim, that all the koiches of Tainuk, and all the details and all the aspects of Tainuk in their nefesh is all gone over into Elikus, so therefore I don't feel any Tainuk in any dover Gashmi or any dover even Ruchni, which may be shot to a lower level or to anything to do with this world. All they are, they're going out the whole time into the Inifan Elikus, the Tainuk Nifla, and it's just increasing the whole time. And that's what's called Ava B'Tanugim, Loshen Rabbim. There's more Tainuk and building further aspects of the Koyach HaTainug in the Nefesh into Elikus. So the Rebbe said, as we explained over there, that there's a form of running or going outwards even in that hour. Now why do we say even in that hour? There's a form of rotoi. It's brought down that the inyan of an hour b'tanugim is dafkin the koyach ha-chokhmah. Dafkin chokhmah is the inyan of an hour b'tanugim, because the inyan of chokhmah has in itself a very profound tainug, because it's the first gilui of Elikus, and it's very, very close and botel b'tachas habitul in Elikus. And therefore, as we saw before, the inyan from Chokhmah is the inyan from Bitl, Permatzias Mamish in Elikus. But when it comes in the form of Ahava, when he wants it, he's longing for something, then that implies that his Tainug is all the time longing for something higher and more elevated. So that indicates that even though that's mitzad the inyan of Chokhmah, nonetheless, there's a form of rotzoi there. That's what he said. Commotion is boili yil. Yes, gam bi'av b'tanugim yesh b'chinas merutze. There's also this inyan of running outwards from, or a desired thing which he's yearning for. But that indicates a inyan from rotzoi. Ela shahal rotzoi v'adveikes hu bebitl kol atzmusei shemizbatl gamri b'zeh. He said, Elamai, he said that the rotzoi over there is a form of, it's together with the word dveikus. We say, we'll call it dveikus. So he said, Ela, a rotzoi via dveikus, which we've defined it as, he bebitl kol atzmusei shemizbatl gamri b'zeh. Emes, he wants to go up, and he's yearning to go up more into the inyan of Tainug and into his cleavage to Elikus. But each time he does, he goes into a high form of Bitl, and he loses his whole self on each step. Mashiach, we said that before, Rotza is for a person who's Tafkin Rochok. And since he's Rochok, he's yearning and thirsting for Elikus. And here's somebody that he's mamish, as it were, involved, betachlis, and every step just takes him more into a bitl, because atzmusay. Nonetheless, we still call it a rotzah. We still say it's a form of rotzah. And he gives a dugma. When a person davens, Sheman Esrei, shehi b'chinas chokhmah ki yadua. It's one on. It's put down. Dafki in a Maimah in Samech Vav, but in another part of the Hemshah, which wasn't actually printed in the actual Hemshah. It's put down that all Madregas in Tefillah up until Emes V'Yatziv, that's to say at the end of Krishma, and including certain parts of Emes V'Yatziv, well, they are connected with the union of understanding, and his bonan is connected with Bina, even Shema Yisrael, like we just saw, Shema is connected with Shmiyah, the union of understanding, and then gradually at a certain point, just before you get to Goal Yisrael, then according to the Kabbalah, you move up into what's called Moichin Da'aba, you go up into the level of Chochmah, and Chochmah is the union from complete Bittul B'Metzias, and therefore it's the union from Koyach Ma, or that's the union of Shemon Esrei. In other words, you become Botel B'Metzias, and you don't have the power to speak as he brings here right now. Maybe Shemon Esrei, Shubchinas Chochma Ki Yadua, Adi Mizbatel Legamrei. He loses his whole Metzias, Ad She'ein Boi Koyach Ladaber, until he doesn't have the power to speak anymore. Kamei Ein Milin Bili Shoini. Oh, that's a lesson in our sage. It's not a pasuk. There's no words in my tongue, which I can't say anything. Ki'im, Hashem Sfosai Tiftoch. At the beginning of Shemon Esrei, well, the Gemara brings it, that's a hefsek between Goal Yisrael and Shemon Esrei. The Gemara in the Sect of Brachas. And the Gemara says, no, it's Ketfila Arichta Domye. It's like an arichas of the tefillah. It's like a piece of the davening, even though it's not mamish the union of Shemon Esrei, but it's like a piece of the davening. It's tefillah arichta. In other words, when you say Hashem Svosai Tiftach, you're leading into the union of Shemon Esrei mamish. But you have to say to the Avish, you open my mouth because I can't really talk anymore. Hashem Svosai Tiftach, and that's an essential part of the actual Shemon Esrei. That's what the Gemara says, Tefillah Arichta. Why? Because you become so bottled b'metzias that you can't talk. When can you talk? When can you say things? And when can you ask for things? And when you're quite a metzias and you have a mind and a whole metzias to explain who you are and what you want and how you want it. Or when you're completely botil b'metzias and you can't talk. Yet nonetheless we want him to say something. The whole infant fool has to come into Dibur. So therefore we request the Avish should give us the power to speak. Hashem Svosai Tiftach Ufi Yagi Tehillah Tehillah Selchar. And nonetheless we see Mikol Mokim Ubchinas Rotzei Mil Ata Lamaila. Nonetheless it's a form of Rotzei. It's a form of beetle, a form of going upwards, mil matala, because we see that you come from Shemon Esrei, from the Bilchus Krishma, Baruch Hashem to Hashem Glo Al Yisrael, and you go further into a higher form of beetle, Hashem Svosai Tiftach, and then you go into the first three brachas of the Shemon Esrei, and then you keep going, as it were, higher and higher in the union of Beetle. This is well known that all the brachas in the Shemon Esrei are different stages, different inyonim. It's at their pneumius in the union from Beetle, but they're bederach aliyah milmatela b'mayla.
So why do we ask for divine Gashmim during Shemon Esrei? Why do we ask for such simple things in the Shemon Esrei?
Why do we ask? Why do we ask for things that we need? Yeah, so it's put down in Siddhas. When you're in a Azar Matzav, then you can ask what you need. If you're still Lamata in Bina and in less than Bina, then you ask a lot and you ask all over the place, but who knows if you're really asking Be'emes what is proper to ask and what is the real thing for you to ask. When you become bottled by Matthias and then you ask, then it's a different type of asking. Well, then we can be sure you're asking. And not only that, Lafi, what the Magid taught, it's a famous Teres HaMagid, that the whole Indian Ein Mispal, only take Kuiv and Reish, you should only stand it up with a heavy head, how do you call it, with deep self-criticism and all this. The Magid said that Kuiv and Reish means the Shechina. When you daven, you're worried about the fact that it's lacking by the Shechina. And all the requests are really not for yourself, they're all for Inyonim and Elokus. Al-Yidei, what you request, that those in Yonim and Arakus should be fulfilled and should be made up, as it were. What they're lacking is due to our lacking. And then, but the Eibishter will give you what you need. So therefore, the Emerson, Oivdi Hashem, and the Emerson does, they didn't daven for themselves at all. They davened only for the Kaviyocho, how it is, Klapi Maila. But they gained what they needed to gain. Anyway, the Inyan of davening, Shemon Esrei, says the Rebbe, the Inyan of going upwards. You go from level to level, even though it's a bittul of Chochmah. And Mamela, so we see that from all that the Inyan of bittul of Chochmah, complete bittul of Metzias, doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have Rotza. You can still be in a state of Rotza, you can still want and feel that you're going, like the Dugma of Av of Tanugim, even though he's given away to the highest power, which is the Inyan of Tainug, he's completely devoted absolutely to the Eibishter. Nonetheless, he keeps going up higher and higher in different levels, Tainug. And that's an Inyan from Tveikus, of cleavage, but in the cleavage itself, new, what you might call vistas, a new giluim in the Inyan of the Tveikus itself. And that's still in a form of Numatala Maila. It's not even of going out into the world and being Poyo Lamata Mata. And that's why we say that after Shemon Esrei, you have to come back down, and that's the Inyan of Tachanun, and then afterwards other Inyanim. In the Inyan HaTefillah, they bring the autumn down from the Dveikis that he had in the Inyan HaTefillah, they bring him down into the world. As well known, we told the story once about the great the Baal Shem Tov. He used to say that he doesn't know if he's going to be able to come back when he's going to daven. It could be completely upwards, and he's going to have unbelievable Siyata Dishmaya to come back down again. As well known, that there was one of the great Talmidei Magid, I think it was, other Gedolei HaChassidus, that they said farewell to their family before they went to daven, because they weren't sure they were going to have the power to come back down again. So I mean, we don't have problems of this particular nature. Although we see that the greatest madrigas of Bittul in Tefillah don't alter the fact that it's still the Inyan of going upwards and outwards, but that's a very, very elevated state of Rotzoi. So how do we say that? No, once you come into the Inyan from Chochmah, the Bittul from Chochmah, then you want to go down only and make a Dira Petach. By Tachtoni, here we see no, that you can be in the Bittul from Chochmah, and the whole Inyan from Shemon Esrei is a Dugma, and what you want to really do is go further and further away from the world, it would appear, and the higher the Bittul, the more you just forget where you are. And so therefore, how do we say that? Moichen de Chochmah is Dafke the Inyan from Shoy.
Does this apply to every person, even though they don't feel it?
If they don't what?
Even though, most people don't feel this, does it apply that everyone goes up to these levels?
The thing is that you only don't feel it because you don't want. Put down Siddur, all the things which are Mavur and Siddur are all open for everybody. And the Hemsheh Vav didn't have a label on it. This is only for certain people. And the Rebbe Rashab didn't give out any of his unbelievable Maimonides. For that matter, the Mittler and all the other guys, the Alter Rebbe, they did write, this is only for Yivdim, and this is only for Tzadikim, and this is maybe for a few Beinanim. The Alter wrote the Tanya, he said, there's a Sefer Shal Beinanim, even for the so-called ordinary man. We don't find that there's any stamp on any of the Maimonim, which means that everything is for everybody. It's meant for all of us. Why is it that somebody says, well, I don't feel this, I'm never going to feel it? But that's because you've decided that you're not going to get involved in these, it's just, tell that back. I'm staying in mine, I'll be okay, I'll be fine, these great things, but not for me. It doesn't mean me at all. It's brought down to the citizens that can even, Chas v'sholem, have a certain trace of Amalek about it. That's what he does, Amalek. He comes along there and he says, oh, you. They said, listen, I'm really not from high things. And he said, oh, yes, you're right. You're not for high things. Yeah. You just stay where you are and just be a schlepper. And don't ever think about high things. So you become a ally of Amalek. And he says that. And he said, oh yes, yes. And you and Amalek agreeing to not fight. That's what it is. But if we just try, then we at least feel we're at least aware of them. At least they talk to us. They tell us something. They have a message to us. Yeah, that must mean something somewhere along the line. And you are away to such a well, must have some effect on it. And therefore, the same with the whole inyan from Moshiach, what the Rebbe talks is so unbelievable. He wants we should all become so verkocht from Moshiach. So the Rebbe said it, yeah. And what did I say? Just remain where you are, take it easy. Moshiach, Mashiach. And so people sort of remain where they are, they say, in the meantime the world is precious to boom, everything just goes. So Rebbe said, yeah, but I don't feel right now for me, and you really mean that, I mean, you hear choshev when people say that, Oh, that's in from Amalek. That's Mamish Amalek. There's Zocher, Reish, Asher, Asolach, Amalek. You'll be forever. You got to remember the whole time. And you got to know that everything the Rebbeim said, they meant it. And they meant it for everybody. They didn't just mean it. Except if they said that it's for us. I mean, the middle of it wrote a famous mimer for a certain person, a certain Balchura. The Pekeh Chivrim was written for a certain person. And so was one of characters, they couldn't trace it from the middle of it. They were written for special people. But it was well known. And he wrote, he said that it was special for this person. You other guys want to learn it, and you get something from Matevim. You understand? Well, apart from that, all Hasidus is for everybody. So therefore, that's the kasha. Here we see that in the bittul from Chochmah, in certain avodas Hashem which come mitzad Chochmah, I know Ava v'Tanugim, which is in Moyach HaChochmah, or the even Sheman Esrei, or they can still be in a form of Vegas, which is Rotzoi, even going Momatala, Laila, and wanting to go out, and on the contrary, going higher and more away from the world rather than coming back down into it. Like we said, from Sheman Esrei, it's a long way to come back into the world of Pearlman. Inyan says, what's the answer? What's the answer to them kasha? Yesh hefresh pozeh imhu b'moyach levod oy kishabo el alev gam kein. There's a pellet kazach. It's mamish that is niflo mamish. He said it all depends whether it's only in the brain or it also comes into the heart. The kasher hu b'moyach levod ozu b'chinas rotzoi u'devekes b'yoyser. Avo kasher nimshach min ha'moyach el halev u'kemoi v'libi ro ha b'chochma. Rebbe Shlomo Melech in Koheles, he says, not far from the beginning of the Sefer Koheles, he says, libi ro har b'chochma. My heart saw, my heart saw, har b'chochma, u'kamayma, that's put down in the Zohar Kodesh. The Tavke Rea Mehemna, the Rea Mehemna is Moshe Rabbeinu. The Moshe Rabbeinu said to Rashbi, he said to him, Be'ein ha'seichel, the belibach, he said, in the iron of your seichel, in the eye of your seichel, which is in your heart, is chazi koila. You can see everything. Lieb chodavke. We see that the seichel has to go down into the heart. Ozu in a shoiv davke. V'hainu t'kasher riyas ayin as seichel shebamoyach nirgash b'leiv gam kein. When it also felt in the heart. This is a pillar. Here we see. We find the kasher from Ava v'Tanugim. Ava is a midah b'leiv. Ava is a midah b'leiv. So the Rebbe said, no, Ahava Tanugim is a rotzoi because it's b'moyach. It's b'moyach. When is it a man feels all of the milas of Chochmah, all the people of Chochmah, and he wants to go down into the world, when it came dark into his heart. So I would have thought, I would have been under the impression that maybe a tape of me there. Because, the heart always is a burn, the heart wants things, it wants to go out and get what it wants. And Ilo, the Inif, and Moyach is something that usually goes upwards and yearns upwards, but nonetheless, the Inif and Moyach is a very adequate, analytical, and ultimately, Moyach tends to be what we call Hishyashvus, does even settling, telling you ultimately what is the final opinion and what should you maybe do. Mashkin heart is, a very emotional and rather ultimately untrustworthy area of our lives. Is it a big verkehrt? He said, no, Davki when it's in Moyach, then you're in a state of rot. It comes down into the heart, then you become bottle, and then you say, what should I really do? Dira betach training. Who should do his ways? It's a very amazing answer. So we'll just read a couple of lines further, and then on the basis of that we'll be able to maybe sum the whole thing up. But can we begash? We'll take an example. On the roim, we see Shadova ha'osi liyos nirgesh b'leiv davke. He said, we see that, for example, a thing which is going to be in the future, an observant person, he feels it in his heart. How do you say? He feels that something's going to be. It's not something he understands in his mind, but he feels it in his heart. He said, who is the real wise man? It's Gemara Masechta Tomit. But the Gemara said, who is the real wise man? He who sees what's going to be born out. He sees what's going to be born. What's going to come out. It's like the old idea of, a wise man sees what's going to come out of what he says or what he does. That he sees it, what's going to be, Bekiruv in a nearness ki'ilu kwabo, like as if it's already there, it's already come. And it becomes very, very earnest by him. He's unshakable that that's what's going to be. Moikain ubariyas halei shalei magish dova ha'osit liyes v'kamei leiv yodea maras nafshoi kein leiva b'dova simcha v'oineg be'izinin pnimi v'atzmi davki magish halei. Poyoboy Hazor cause a big movement within the person. Ki'ilu ador kwaba. So here we see that Heinemus, we admit that in Chochmah, you can also see what's going to be. Chochmah Reisa, Hanoit, that he also sees what's going to be. And then he says that even from Leiv, the Leiv, Kilo knows what's going to be. What is the chilek? What's the difference? I mean, he says that both the Moyach and the Leiv have the same almost ability to feel and to be aware of something that's going to come. So what's the nafkamina? And he says that when it's in the heart, then it's not kishoy. Koloid that it's in the Moyach, it's rotzei. And like we said, that also seems to be a little bit against our normal principles. Why would that be? So here we have to say, the mind of that person that he feels it, it's at the heart, and he's aware of what's going to come. It's at the leiv davke, adova osit liyos. He is that he already is reacting to how that's going to be. The chacham who sees that it's going to be, he just sees it's going to be as anazama Matthias, but he hasn't given people the whole line yet how they should react and what's going to be the necessity to do in this world. That this is going to be. He just said that, it's on my chokhmah. I can assume, I can see that this is going to be. But even seeing it mitzad the leiv, that his heart sees that it's going to be, well, then he becomes tremendously involved, and he's so involved that he says we have to do something about it. It's got to be already prepared for and done in such a way that we make that thing a part of the world, even though it hasn't come yet. But we must make it part of the world, because the inyan from the leiv is the inyan from midas, and midas are nimshach dafki lamata. Their inyan is dafki to go into life and do into poil mamish. And even though they have certain chisreinis midas, the truth is, and the leiv has a certain, but we're talking here about the pnimius of the leiv. We're talking about the very etzem and pnimius of the leiv, which is receiving from a very high court, which is the inyan from chokhmah. When it comes down in that chokhmah, that bittul, then there's a mile in the leiv even over the moyach. Normally speaking, we say that there's a mile in moyach over the leiv. Moyach shalit alev, the moyach rules the leiv. With all those in yon. But when we're talking about Shochem Pnimius V'atzmiyas, that he's already seen it in the Moyach HaChochma, which higher than that you can't really go. And that comes down into the heart, then that touches what the Pnimius of the Lev. And the Pnimius of the Lev is a very powerful koyach, maybe even more than the Pnimius of the Moyach. That's a big chiddush. It's written in Siddur, I say, that Dafki, because the Lev feels things, well, that's a sign that there's a very high inyan in Leiv. Like we said before, Kol Adar HaKavoya B'Yoysa, Davki it comes Lamata B'Yoysa. Davki, he who not only sees it that it's going to be in his moyach, but he feels it, and he kochts it. And if it was already there, and he says, listen guys, do this and do that, because this is what it is, even though it hasn't been yet, that's a sign that it comes from a very, very high level. And this Ava B'Tanugim, that's really a Moyach Tikazach. It's not really a Emes Midah B'Lev. And that was what down it says. That Ava B'Tanugim is B'Emes Mitzad the Moyach. You can have Ava Mitzad the Moyach. It's like Midas inside the Moyach. And your Moyach is so dovik in this Chochman, this Bittul Mitzad the Moyach, that you feel this unbelievable arousal. But it's more like it's colorless of arousal in seichel. It didn't really come into the heart. And somebody's got Emerson, Al Baton is very withdrawn. He's completely, as we say, he's verkocht. And there's even that he doesn't really have a great deal of awareness of what's going on around him. But he said, when the Ava Tanugi is nimshach into the heart, the man feels it, then it goes into the Pnimius Alev. The Pnimius Alev is a very powerful koyach. When it draws everything down and says, let's make ready and let's prepare and let's meet this thing the way we should do it. This is the mile of the Pnimius Alev Davke. This is the Pshat. That's the answer. When we said that the inyan from Chochman is an inyan from Rotzoi, that's after when it's in a state of the Moyach. The Ikar Bittul is in the Moyach, and the Ikar going upwards is in the Moyach. When that Moyach has come down into the Lev, that same Chochma is affected into the Pnimius Alev, then also the Sayin Fen Shoi. Then was Davkit comes down. So we see here a fascinating thing, that the real home of Emes and Chochma, Emes and Bittul, and the higher you go into the Emes and Bittul of the Chochma, until Riyah Mamish, the Emes and home, as you might call it, Davkit that should come into the and it should leave the Moyach, as it were, and come into the heart. That is the Yemit Isin, and that's the Emes Shleimas of the highest Madrega in the Moyach. So that's what we say always, that the Moyach runs the heart. That's in the Chitania saying that. In the Pnimiyas, ultimately speaking, the heart is the goal, and that is the ultimate perfection of a mensch, that he feels in the heart the highest inyanim. And that's what's put down from the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe says that there's a certain neshama gefühl in the heart, in the Jewish heart, in the Yiddish hearts, that sometimes you reach into a heart of a Yid, you sort of in some way you touch off something tremendously profound, because hidden inside the Pnimius Alev is really a touch of the Pnimius HaChochma. And That's a union from Bittul. Therefore, when you read the famous statement, the Yiddish hearts, or the famous expression, das Pintele Yid, the deep inner little dot of a Yid, that's dot is Chochmah, it's Nakuda. We say, where is Tafki in the Jewish heart? Tafki it's in his heart. The Nakuda, Amidius von alles Ding, the Nakuda, Atsuma, powerful, Pintele, what we call the little dot of the Yid, is a Tafki believer. Tafki in his heart. So those are the terms, and we'll see more about it. We'll discuss it more in length. I know tomorrow evening, a little bit more in detail. Was it the union of the Maila or the Amshofis, Bittul de Chochmah into the Lev Davk. Thank you.
If somebody has Reitze, is it from the?
You're saying it wrong. You got to get used to it. You got it wrong. The word Reitze is an active verb.
Okay.
The word Rotzoi is a participial noun. Rotzoi means going out and upwards, or wanting, albeit, but it's a noun. It's a participial noun.
So
Rotzoi. You keep saying Reitze. Reitze is a verb. Reitze is a certain verb, which is part of the word Rotzoi.
So if somebody has Ratzai, it's because he wants it, right? And usually if he wants something, he feels it, and most of the time he feels it in the heart. Not the Maya. Because I feel and I like the feeling that I get, so it's usually Hargesh in the heart.
You have a very good point. But the what you call it, the testing ground, the Evan HaBochem, the testing stone, they call it, is that when you feel that and you feel it in your heart, it depends what that tells you. If that tells you, I just want to continue feeling good, going upwards and being very high and very elevated and making this emotional as well as moyach, then that's a sign that it's not really mitzad the pnimius. But when it comes down to the pnimius alev, then the pnimius alev feels, what is the real purpose of all these things. And when you come into the lev and you become moved so profoundly that you say, I don't want any more just what this implies. I want to know what does he imply with giving me this unbelievable gift. That's the sign of the true pnimius alev. And that's the message here. And it's a pilli play. It's a big yisod. All the things that are written in Siddur about the heart being emotional and being, that's really the chitzenius of the way. Even though Halavai Hara Yidin is such a chitzenius. But it is only the chitzenius of the way. When you get into the pnimius, ve'atzmius of the lev, then there's a certain knowledge and intuition. And that's what he said to Roy Mahemna. The Roy Mahemna is Moshe again. He said, it's written in the Zohar, in Pash Mishpatim. And he said to Rashbi, he said to Shimon, believe is chazi kula. In the feeling of your heart, you'll be able to see everything. You'll be able to see everything which is necessary. Moshe Rabbeinu for sure knew what was necessary.
And you can daven from the pnimius of the heart.
Yeah, then you begin to feel what is really good.